Hold it for just a minute. Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. Man, this is another little medium I'm trying out. So I have to hit that. Alrighty, we just gonna go right into it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk
That's
about
man, I'm gonna have to,
Okay.
I'm gonna be moving around.
All right.
Hold on, not yet.
Oh, not yet? Okay.
We almost there. That's just a lie. So that's like building audience here.
Get out.
Hold on for a minute. Oh.
Building out.
All right, Barry, you're on.
All right. Welcome, family. I'm just being honest, connecting with the Black experience. Bless. Morning. I got some heavy hitters coming in today. Got some of them young bulls.
Peace, fam. I'm Joshua from Sacramento City College Black Student Union.
You already know what it is. And of course, I have the lovely, beautiful. You got some of the flyest joints. You know what I'm saying? I know you're not trying. You're doing it. You know what I'm saying? Queen Mama Rowe. Of course, me, Barry Axius. We are about to get into it. We got another guest coming in too shortly. We got a lot to talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about, the first situation I want to break down, I want to give light to, because I feel like it's important for us to honor the life and times, the legacy of our brother John Singleton. Brother had a stroke. Unfortunately, he got put in a coma and he died just more recently, earlier in the week, at 51 years old. 51 years old. John Singleton, for some of those who don't know some of his more recent workings, he was doing, what was that movie, Snowfall? That not movie, but show Snowfall.
Netflix.
That dealt with, actually was on FX. It was on FX.
Okay, I thought it was Netflix.
That dealt with the crack era, something that we talk a lot about, putting into light of the effects of the 80s crack era, as well as doing some episodes on Empire, on Fox, as well as Billions on Showtime. And of course, he's legendary for the phenomenal, if you're a 90s baby, an 80s kid, you're really going to resonate with The Boys in the Hood. One of the most phenomenal films from me coming up as a young teen that I watched, that influenced me, influenced the culture in so many different ways, presented so many different actors. Regina King was now an older Regina King, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like was her cinematic come up, right? Because we remember her from 227, mm-hmm. and kind of like after 227, where was Regina King, right? And then boom, here she was playing one of the young ladies in South Central in the Crenshaw area that was in Boys in the Hood. And of course, it introduced us to as what we knew as Ice Cube, Doughboy, right? Ice Cube, a phenomenal rapper at that particular time, was one of the elite artists at our time before you seeing him transition to what now is him not only a film producer and actor, getting into the Big Three League, as well as creating his own independent circuit of movies, but his inspiration was John Singleton, right? Getting into his own pot, and just a host of other, Morris Chestnut, Cuba Gooding Jr., who went on to do some great films, as well as also get an Academy Award, I believe, right? Cuba Jr., mm-hmm. You got one, right? And just it launched off so many different careers. Nia Long, right? You know what I mean? You have Lawrence Fishburne. This was a launching pad for some careers. Angela Bassett, of course. Mm-hmm. Where not Two Boys, not Boys in the Hood.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just talking about Boys in the Hood.
Oh, yeah,
then you flip and you get into Poetic Justice, and of course you see a young Tupac Shakur being in this. I want to say possibly his second or third film, because of course he did Juice. I don't know if that one movie that he did with Mickey Rourke was before Poetic Justice, but nevertheless, Poetic Justice came. You had Tupac and Janet on the same screen, and who wasn't cheering for that love story, right? And of course, you kind of saw him take that approach that Spike Lee took of bringing other, artists that he used, as Regina King was in this movie again, highlighting Black actors that wouldn't have got the opportunity, right? That, of course, with the success of Boys in the Hood, it was enabling us to see the Hughes brothers come and do Menace to Society, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that was an open-end theory of just the nuance of Black film, as we were so used to some of the Black exploitation films in the days of the 70s. You had movies like The Education of Sonny Carson. I don't know, some folks say,
I
remember that, right?
Yeah.
The Tomahawks and what's the other group? I think the Lords, right? So when you used to seeing movies like that, and then you get a movie that really entertains, makes you cry, brings you to your own reality, right? It subjects you to so many different things. I remember leaving, and one of the young bulls that unfortunately ended up dying, the one that had the pacifier in his mouth, right? Not
the taller dude,
the one with the hair. You know what I'm saying? He had the pacifier in his mouth. You had a lot of us after that walking around. Don't ask me, we were crazy. We walked around with pacifiers in our mouth, right? It just shows you kind of how the movie not only resonated, but we embraced it, and it definitely put positive and negative spins on the Black community all at the same time, even though it was speaking truth. One of the most powerful parts of that movie that when I was a young bull, I had no idea, was the part when it was Ricky and Trey, Cuba and Chestnut and Lawrence Fishburne, who was Trey's father. They came to, Trey's father's, place of business, and they were talking about gentrification. Like right there, if you go back into that scene, as well as what we'll be talking about a little bit later, the police brutality around that time, when you as a Black male is watching, and it was a police officer harassing a black youth.
He just died early this week. The guy who played that role.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You have a police officer who was Black, African American, doing what the oppressor does and harassing Black youth in that way. I felt like that movie touched on every reality of a Black person, and I think that's why I fell in love with that movie, because it was like me on the TV screen without being me on the TV screen. And it spoke to so many things that I saw, so many things I knew. Of course, where I was at, the gangbanging wasn't the way it was in LA, right? But there were so many different circuits and so many different pockets of different things that depicted what I was dealing with as a young person. What did you feel about John Singleton's legacy, and maybe even just any of the films that you've probably seen throughout his history as a filmmaker?
Man, I thought John Singleton was dope. I thought he was one of our gems in our community. I think that he highlighted a lot of issues with his movies and with his films. I think, again, he put a lot of people on. I don't got nothing but good things to say about the brother. I think that one of the unfortunate things that that has to be highlighted too is that, especially a lot of Black men, I see a lot of Black men dying kind of early, and it's like it's always from health concerns. That's crazy. I think one of the things is that health is wealth. We got to take care of ourselves. We got to live healthy lifestyles, and I think that, like, even today, I seen Curtis Blow. I think is in the hospital.
Is that right?
Right.
People
Curtis Blow.
Too.
Right. And so I think it just highlights another issue. It's like if we survive the statistics, we survive poverty, we survive the police and all these other factors that could kill us. We don't want to be dying from things like bad eating. And not to say I don't know what Brett had going on, but I'm just seeing a trend. Hypertension. So like these things we got to address. I see a lot of Black males dying at an early age. I think we should all be living up to our 80s, 90s, not past 10. But the brother, he was dope, man. I salute him. And we should always honor Brett.
What you think, Queen?
I thought it was phenomenal. Having lived at the time when he first came out with Boys in the Hood.
Yeah,
All
right.
the way up to Rebel, when he gave our dear local sister
Yeah,
a chance to
shouts
start
out
our
that.
own television show.
Yeah, and then
Which
you know, Queen is so dope. I mean, I'm just hoping that she's being able to kind of move and navigate through this, and also gets other opportunities as well, because I heard that she just was picked up for the Snowfall joint as well to do some stuff. And that's just him really looking out, right? Some things didn't happen. Rebel, I thought was a dope show,
I did too.
and then of course you know how it is. But
I think he opened the door.
Yeah.
Sometimes all you need people to do is open the door for you. The rest of the stuff you got to do on your own most times, because he still has the battles that he's trying to deal with or heights he want to get to. And so I think that I hope that there's a lot of young folks who didn't know who he was discover who he was. Because sometimes that happens. I hate to say it when people pass, just like Brother Nipsey. He didn't get that much support when he was living like that. Now they got back orders of $2 million worth of merchandise they got to move from the Marathon store in terms of getting it out to people.
yeah.
So I just wish we would support people when they're alive and appreciate them when they're alive by supporting their work. And there should be a whole wasn't that a trilogy he gave us with Boys in the Hood, Baby Boy, and one more? It was a trilogy that was a part of his packaging.
Well,
in the earlier stages.
I think that it was Boys in the Hood. It was Poetic Justice, and it was Higher Learning.
Higher Learning.
Okay. And
okay.
out of all his movies, when you talk about Rosewood, you talk about Shaft.
Oh God, I love Rosewood.
You talk about
my favorite
you know what I'm saying?
movies.
Like, you talk about those things that he put out there, some of his work. I believe Higher Learning was probably one of his best pieces of work. The reason why I say that is because Higher Learning exactly identifies with everything that we're dealing with right now, right? I mean, when we talk about a culture of racism and how it plays out in the schools and these different college campuses, I know, me and Jay, when I got called to help out with the Sac City BSU with some of the racial things that happened over there, the language, the white supremacist and the white nationalist that was highlighted in that movie, and the actors did an excellent job of portraying that, of how it became one thing to another, right? How he wasn't accepted in this group, how he wasn't accepted in that group, and how he manifests into this white nationalist, this white supremacist. It really plays out the things that we see now currently. And I believe that film, as well as all these other films, were not only talking about the Black plight, but it's also talking about racial tensions in America in general. And we have to remember, think about this. It wasn't like John Singleton was doing something that was socially accepted in the cinema world that's pretty much controlled by Europeans, right? So it's not like he was in there and everybody embraced the fact that he was talking about Black culture unapologetically, right? That he was bringing in actors. Some of these actors were first-time actors with him, as he was a first-time film producer, right? They were first-time actors. So when there were kind of the established Black actors that folks would be like, well, why don't you use that person or use that person? He might have took a Regina King that we were used to, Lawrence Fishburne that hadn't blown up yet, Angela Bassett that hadn't blown up yet, and put him in the film. But he was really utilizing young actors and actresses that we didn't really know, right? Like gambling on Ice Cube, gambling on Tupac, right? Tupac was supposed to be his, as many reports as I remember them working together, his Robert De Niro, right? As Martin Scorsese was with Robert De Niro when you seen him on multiple films, that was supposed to be Tupac. It was almost supposed to be like how Spike Lee had Denzel Washington. The unfortunate part about the era of Tupac was his troublesome side, right? It caught up with him, and I think that it made it harder for John Singleton to maneuver in the film world, because it's not one thing you're having a Black person try to do films, and another thing you're trying to have a reckless Black person be the top name in your film. So it's like you're getting all kind of pushback. So I think that when I look at the whole situation between John Singleton and the Tupac of what it could have been, right? I wish those brothers could have had more magic on the big screen. And I think it all broke down because of the behavior that Tupac displayed, as well as the pressure that John Singleton got. And then, of course, it manifested with Tupac, his early demise. you heard John Singleton. The one thing that I'll say that I was just kind of disappointed about with John Singleton is when he had the All Eyes on Me in his hand, right? It was about to be a role with him. And me imagining what he's done with all these different films, had he had All Eyes on Me, All Eyes on Me with the Tupac documentary or bio film would have probably been one of the greatest movies of all time. Because Tupac's character, his life, as short as it was, it would have been that impactful. He wanted to put a rape scene, right, about Tupac Shakur. I don't know if that rape ever happened. I don't know what his mindset was on that, but he was hell-bent on putting that in the film. And that's kind of like deterred folks for like, yo, we're going to go a different way. And you see All Eyes on Me being what it was and really not giving Tupac's legacy what it really needed, because that movie could have been a lot better. But I think that if there's anyone mark or blemish, I'll say, damn, why did we have to go there? Because it would have been John Singleton directing and filming All Eyes on Me, the Tupac bio. And I think that would have been excellent.
I think the other thing that's to look at about John Singleton, here is a man who stood the test of time because he also was around when Black people's taste switched. But we weren't into reality, we were into Tyler Perry. And so we were into that whole churchy kind of talk about our dramas kind of thing, stereotypical stuff. He survived even that period of time because that was also, as a filmmaker, a very hard time for Black filmmakers. It was hard for Spike Lee.
It was just
figure out
Spike Lee,
why all the Black people are going to go see Tyler Perry, nothing against Tyler Perry, and not, that genre of film,
but not
stories.
Yeah,
but the fact that he survived that time period speaks to who he was as well.
But just make sure, Tyler Perry wasn't around yet. He wasn't around yet.
He was around doing stage production.
But I think that
we knew he was going to switch over to film.
Yeah, but he wasn't. We're talking about mainstream.
No. I'm telling what I'm saying to you, Barry, is that he still had to survive when Tyler Perry came. It was like one time I heard Jay-Z do an interview when he talked about when the 50 Cent released his stuff, how he had to tell his camp, hold on, because here come 50 Cent, and things may shift a little bit, but just hold on a minute. That's the part we never get to understand about icons. You don't become an icon because you make 5, 10 different good films. You become an icon of how you live across the generations and time spans. That he kept making his way. There is no resting place for the Black director or filmmaker. You don't get to where people just come to the studio, just hand you stuff off and be like, here's your film you're going to do each year. You're not guaranteed any of that as a Black filmmaker or director or whatever. So the fact that he continued to work and produce films even through that time period was, to me, amazing. Speaks to the test of time. Like, he had his big blow up time, and then he had to figure out how to do a plateau, if you will.
Yeah, I know, and
that's what I'm trying to say. And I think that's impressive.
No, I get what you're saying, but I'm just make sure we're accurate on just the time frame. There was a time frame where, yes, it was a Tyler Perry era that came through, but it was Spike Lee and John Singleton at first, and then here came the more of the let's kind of and
that's all I'm saying.
Tyler Perry for all,
because he started off in stage production,
and
stuff
all concerning. I mean, he had great messages, but I think that some of the things kind of spun out of control. And I think my frustration, it was always like when it was a nuanced thing, it's just kind of like hip hop. It's like, we're not going to talk about the conscious stuff no more. We're just going to talk about all of the destructive behavior.
I agree.
So when
that's all I'm saying. I just thought that was like, wow, like he still figured out how to produce.
He had to reinvent himself.
Right. Like that's not easy to do.
And I think that all producers, as well as I think some movies that we don't even think that he did, was Four Brothers. When he had Marky Mark and we had Andre 3000, Tyrese, and then of course the second Fast and Furious. That's when Tyrese exploded, and really he utilized Tyrese the way he was going to utilize Tupac, because Tyrese was then in a major film, Baby Boy, that Taraji Henson, she got her big break on that. You know what I mean? So he was really breaking a lot of Black actors and actresses that would have never got the opportunity.
Right on.
So that to me speaks volumes to his legacy in a place that loves Black culture but hates Black people and don't want Black people to have anything to do with the success of our films, our sports,
I agree.
our education, whatever we kind of put in place.
So while we're talking about John Singleton in particular in his first film, The Boys in the Hood, and that black cop who recently became an ancestor himself, the actor who played that role, what do you think about this black cop who just been convicted this summer? Because usually we talk about cops, we think about white men, and that's usually give more play. But this was a black cop who was also Islamic cop. Let's go put it in there. Who killed the white woman who was from Australia. News is interesting because last night I got a chance to listen to, I was trying to figure out what's going on in Venezuela, to hear Fox News tell stuff. You think we back in 1920. Because they just be talking about all kind of crazy shit. But what is y'all feelings on that? How does that fit into, is that part of the justice that we're talking about for all lives matter?
I think it's exactly what they're talking about when they say all lives matter. I think that what that does is it points and it highlights that with under the blue shield or the blue line of protection, black officers aren't included in that. The use of force and the dangers of the use of force becomes real evident when white lives are taken. I think that if it would have been a white officer that shot a black lady or a black woman or a black man, it would have been a different scenario. And what's most interesting to me is that I don't really see the police union coming out and defending the officer as they usually do.
I didn't think about that.
So usually when officers are being charged with committing a crime for shooting or killing somebody, the police unions and the police usually have the backing of the officer. They come out and say anyone speaking down on it, they kind of denounce those people, tell them to apologize. Remember when Kevin Johnson had spoke out against the Ferguson situation where Mike Brown was killed. The police unions here in Sacramento, I think the only thing Kevin Johnson said was that it was a shame. And the police union here in Sacramento said that he needed to apologize.
Your place.
Yeah, basically got on his line about it. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out with the police unions, how much the police will protect the officer in this situation. But I think that he got like 20 years, right? So that's like another thing. Like every other instance where an officer was convicted of killing someone, I've never seen him get like 20 years. I think
manslaughter and
third degree murder. Right. And it's like the officer that killed Walter Scott, he recently got convicted, right?
Yeah.
And how he got like what, 7 years or something like that?
Walter Scott got more. I think Walter Scott got 20. I think he got 20. It was the guy in Chicago. The officer in Chicago got 7.
Quan McDonald. Okay,
and he's going to be probably do maybe just 3. That's what I'm thinking. That's probably going to end up happening. He got 7.
It's super rare. And another thing was that the body cameras wasn't on in that incident. So it's like there's not a lot of evidence to use to convict the officer other than their retelling of the scenario. So I thought it was interesting. I think that it definitely shows how race plays out within the Blue Lives Matter, within police, shows that the blue line doesn't protect black officers as it does white ones.
But do you think the black officers signing on to that knew that though?
Nah.
I mean,
you don't think?
I'm just asking. I'm not trying to be funny.
Yeah,
I think if we talk about the, you
got to introduce yourself.
You're right. You're right. I'm tripping. Peace, family. My name is Khalil.
Once again.
Yeah. Got my degrees in international relations and economics. Been on the front lines of my brothers here.
No doubt.
I was gonna say if we talk about, I think he didn't know. I think if you look at the fraternal order of the police and the blue line of silence that we've always talked about, he probably thought they was gonna have his back. He probably thought he had it good. And if we look at the conduct of some black police officers in our black neighborhoods, I've always said that the answer to policing of our neighborhoods is not going to be create more black police because they create the mindset of the white police essentially. It's really the system.
They buy into
it. Yeah. Exactly. So it's really not a matter of he knew what he was getting into. He had the mindset that look, I'm the police. I'm the law around here. I can get away with this. I'm part of it. I got the blue line, the blue wall of silence. I got the blue wall of silence. I got the fraternal order of the police behind me. The police unions. Oh, bet. And they was not there for him when it really came down to it.
I think that the crazy part about it all is that this sacrifice will be their call because now if you really look at it, there's literally been 3 convictions, right? If you think about it, we have Walter Scott, we have the McDonald case in Chicago.
Philly got arrested on murder too.
Which one?
Remember it was I think there was evading police. He bounced out. He started running, and as soon as he didn't even say that, he bounced out of the police car and started shooting Brandon back as he was running away. And Philly came down on him quick. He said, "No, you getting charged with murder."
Yeah, but getting charged and getting convicted
I
is
think it
two
was
different
convicted
things.
too. I'm not sure.
I'm not too sure. I know for sure we have 3, right?
Yeah.
And we got the Muslim brother, which was not only he's black, but he's Muslim. So that's a double whammy, right? And something that you preferenced when we talked earlier offline, Jay, they didn't say white, they said Australian one. So just kind of utilizing the language. And I think what we always have to pay attention to is language, right? Language, symbols, reactions, and how folks really stand with or stand away. And the police union stood away, where now they can utilize and say, with this adoption of the Blue Lives Matter because of the Black Lives Matter, right? And the idea that we have said police don't get convicted. Well, here's these folks that got convicted, right? Here are these sacrificial lambs. And we know with the McDonald case in Chicago, as the officer got 7 years, probably will end up doing 3 or 4. The other officers that helped, just like make sure, throwing evidence out and just that whole piece, right? They didn't get convicted of anything, right? So when you have a background of police being crooked because they don't want to identify with it, they're covering up the murder, right? They got to walk. So that just lets you know when Chicago is spinning off trying to take Jesse down, but there's still this corruption about, protecting police. You really act and say, damn, nothing has changed. But for these black officers, though the officers in Baltimore weren't convicted because there was a lot of black officers in the Baltimore case of the brother that got killed over there, everyone got off. It's very telling by this being a white woman, being a black officer, what the fate of this officer is and how we're not even really talking about it. It's almost kind of like conviction, let's move on. And it's almost kind of like a win on, maybe some people will say both sides. Do you feel like that? Is it a win on both sides? Because what we've been screaming, what we've been hollering, what we've been begging for is convictions, right?
Wow.
So what does it matter if it's a black officer? It's a conviction.
That's really true.
That's facts. That's facts. I think it's not necessarily. I think it's pointing out the flaws in the system and how it doesn't work for black people, even if you were in the system, bro. It's not necessarily saying we don't want the conviction because he's black. It's saying, look, how you handle it when it comes to race and how you handle it when it comes to a black officer killing a white or Australian or European woman, as opposed to a white or black male killing a black man. It's the concern for the black individual who's died at the hands of the police, regardless of their black man, black woman, in that situation, and how they don't have the care for that. There's no remorse. From the there's plenty of support for the justifiability of the killing of a black life, but when it's any kind of killing of a white life, they're like, oh no, you're getting the book, no matter what color you are.
So do you feel like with the officer that now is being on trial, the white officer in Dallas, right? And something had leaked that basically she was afraid that she would get fired, and I think some of the stuff she said, oh, I'm fucked, whatever, in there. Do you feel, Jay, that now because we've seen what played out with the black officer, knowing America don't give a damn about two people, black people and white women, though white women stay under a privilege, right? And I'm talking about, when I say black people, I'm talking about black men, black women, black children. We put it all on that. White women, after all of that is said and done, right behind us of a class that America don't give two shits about, though they fall under a privilege. Do you feel that she'll be a sacrificial lamb as well?
That one's actually going to be interesting. I've been looking at it and kind of following it as well. Did they charge her yet? I don't think they did they?
No, she's about to go on. They're about to put the trial in effect. If she's been charged.
She's been charged. She's been charged. Yeah, it's going to be interesting with that one. I'm not sure. I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen with it. Honestly, I don't know if they're going to convict her or not. It's kind of like a toss-up with these cases. I think what's interesting to me is always the explanation on what was a reasonable fear, right? So that's what this whole use of force thing is about. It's about saying that officers are able to use force when they're reasonably fear for their lives or someone else's life. So reading the papers and the explanation from the DA, which I look into, about what was unreasonable about the use of force, and then comparing it with other scenarios that we feel are injustices, is what's going to determine whether or not she's convicted or not. So I'm not sure what that is at this time.
That's funny. I was actually talking to one of my professors about the word reasonable, because it's not only used in matters of just police use, just a justification of police use of force. It's also used in justification for illegal immigrant, immigration laws. The reasonable word. I just picked that yesterday, and what we kind of discussed was the inherent correctness behind the word reasonable, which is always assigned to the oppressor. And that's why they're so, if you think about when we've been pushing for AB 392, it's that word that changed from reasonable to necessary, and what they've been really fighting. If we said in the AB 392 hearing, they were all like, I can't support it with the change in the word from reasonable to necessary, because that word reasonable implies inherent systematic correctness to the officers.
And it's kind of objectionable. Yeah, I mean, it's not objectionable. It's kind of subjective. You know what I mean? Like, what's a reasonable fear? Is it reasonable for you to be scared of something? I don't know. You know what I mean? It depends on you. It depends on the circumstances. Some people will say that reasonable is what most people would do in the situation. But with Stephon Clark's situation, we've been out at night super late. Everyone has. And people pull out phones. How many times is a phone mistaken for a gun? Is it reasonable to mistake a cell phone for a gun? In that case, they determined that it was. So always checking that out is what I'm interested in this case. Same thing with.
Plus, I also know that white women do have value coming from a black woman standpoint. I don't know what that means for black men, but I know historically the white woman has always been used to rain down terror on black people. So she is definitely way more valuable than black people, than Latino people, than anybody with melanin. And I feel like they will protect her, as they always have. Even in Rosewood, that was a real occurrence that happened. That wasn't like a great, even that was my favorite movie for John Singleton was Rosewood, to be able to tell a story like that. And when he interviewed the last surviving person who was a child, he talked about how fearful this woman was in sharing that story. So, and that stemmed from a white woman lying about her sexual affairs with another white person. And she said a black man did it, and that's all they needed, even though they knew she had lied. So white women have this way of turning on the waterworks, and it's all over. Because then they put on their shining coat and all of that and be like, we got to go rescue her. There'll be some kind of spin on this because she is a part of upholding white supremacy. We cannot act like she in the same boat with us, because I know she definitely is not, never have been.
I think that if they do convict her or something, it'll probably be more like a manslaughter. You know what I mean? I doubt if they'll charge her and convict her with murder. Yeah. But if she gets any type of conviction, I think it'll probably be a manslaughter joint.
Did y'all see that article? It happened literally 4 days ago. The dude, officers killed a man in North Carolina. That they were telling him to put down his gun, and he was putting down a gun, and like literally on the body camera, it says his last words was, "You told me to," like basically, go on. So you told me to put the gun down, and they shot him as he was putting the gun down.
Where this was at?
North Carolina.
Well, I mean, there was just recently a couple that was singing in the car,
singing love songs.
They sing love songs to each other,
right,
and police jump out because they felt that was a car used in a robbery, and start shooting at the people and claim that they were reaching for something when the guy comes out and he has his hands up and he's getting shot at. So the reality is that policing all across the board is so fragmented. And when I actually had a conversation with a bunch of students at Sac State just more recently. I was talking to a class. I got invited by a teacher, and I was breaking down the ideas of what policing looks like here in America, past, present, future. And it was like I identified with the slave catchers and the slave patrols, right, as what they were called. And they didn't have any idea that was the origin, right? You know what I mean? So like they never understood the 1872 law that we're trying to disconnect with the AB 392, right? That the language of that has created the deaths of, millions of black people, right? Because we're at that million stage if we're taking it from the time it was existed to the time we are right now. And I think that identifying that they were slave catchers, slave patrols, you know what I'm saying? That's what it was, right? The origin of policing was due to slavery, enslavement, that we missed the point of why we're so frustrated, we're so angry, where it brought up other things like, well, why do we take into consideration or hold the Constitution to this bearing on our chest when the Constitution was written by a bunch of white dudes who was sipping on moonshine and whiskey and having slaves coming in there bringing you know what I'm saying, and having slaves coming in bringing their meals, right? It wasn't like it was a whole bunch of motel culture group of men, women, and genders sitting at the table. We're really listening to a bunch of slave masters conducting what America looks like through their lens that has nothing to do with people of color, right? So it trips me out. But in a bigger note, as we're having all of these shootings across the boards, unfortunately, there was another shooting in San Diego. You know, of course, it was a white person, a white domestic terrorist. There was another shooting last night. Of course, it was a white domestic terrorist. 2 dead, 2 injured. I think San Diego, a few injured, 1 dead. You have all these multiple white domestic terrorists who now see other shootings and walk in their little soapbox and say, I want to do the same thing. Copycat killers.
Arms. It's all these people are called arms.
You have this array of gun violence happening all across the board. When you saw the Orlando shooting, again, all suspects that we're usually talking about, they're all displayed. It was crazy. The young white kid, the 19-year-old that did the shooting in San Diego, they had him playing a piano. They had these nice pictures. And of course, they had the detail of how the parents didn't really know what was going on. There has to be some mental dysfunction, as well as now what they're playing out with the, young dude in Charlotte with the shooting over there. White folks definitely get the glamour of being murderers, domestic terrorists, than black people who get killed by police, right? We are vilified, as we know from the Stephon Clark, where the second round of Stephon Clark really hit a dagger, because I think all of us at this table knew that there was going to be no kind of charge, right? We knew what it was going to be, right? But the fact that the DA went a stretch further to criminalize the fact that Stephon Clark was A, B, and C, but we look at these murders, these heinous acts by white domestic terrorists, they are being pictured as innocent white young men that had just went astray, almost as if we don't know what happened, and this sickness isn't just a reality, it's something that had to probably happen because he got bullied, he didn't get enough Cheerios at home, whatever they want to throw the makeup on, right?
Cheerios.
Yeah. We go deeper into the content of now. We looked at Orlando, that mass shooting, and how a lot of the young people, a majority white, did a march for our lives, and kind of displayed the gun violence in the high schools and just gun violence throughout. But they didn't touch on gun violence with police that happened to black people. You courageous brothers, as well as a multiple of other young people that weren't here, aren't able to be here, some are in school right now, are currently doing something that can define a different look and a different lens on what gun violence really truly has to look like when we talk about reform. It can't just be reform because synagogues, mosques, black churches, high schools, or schools or malls are getting shot up. It has to be enforced with, if we're going to talk about gun violence, it has to be done across the board. And we have to look at the gun violence displayed with police officers on black people. The idea that you guys are channeling in this thing on May 2nd, what was your idea, your philosophy? Why is this March for Your Lives 2 important for folks to be involved in?
Okay, so March for Our Lives 2, you touched on a lot of things already. So the original March for Our Lives touched on gun violence in our schools and in our communities, taking place after the Parkland shooting. We stand in solidarity with the original March for Our Lives, and we're saying that gun violence is an important issue that needs to be tackled and that politicians should address it. We got to stop gun violence in our schools and in our communities. A part of gun violence that exists within our communities is police gun violence. That's what we look to bring forward to the forefront of the conversation of gun violence, the national conversation of gun violence with March for Our Lives 2.
Just put it in some context. Why we chose May 2nd, if you look at our flyer, it says, in honoring the Black Panthers. Us being our Black nationalists, Pan Africans, we always gonna rock with the Panthers and that ideology. But more importantly, on May 2nd, 1967, the Panthers stormed the Capitol with guns, straps, fighting for these same over policing, the end of police brutality, and for the police to stop beating us to get out of our communities, fighting for the same stuff. So it's it's kind of been an endemic kind of battle that we're still doing 50 plus years later to rid the police of the over policing and the police brutality in our communities. Specifically going into policy and specifically outlining what that looks like, as Unc and Josh said.
And one of the things that was actually is interesting about May 2nd when the Panthers stormed the Capitol was that they were actually protesting a stricter gun law, right? So it's kind of a coincidence.
Meaning what?
They were protesting a stricter gun law. So they were looking to change the law about open carry.
Okay.
So the Panthers were protesting against stricter gun laws.
Okay.
That kind of goes against the idea of March for Our Lives. But when you look at it, why they were protesting that, it was because these was Black students too. That's what we got to remember. So us coming up with this idea of police gun reform is not a new idea. That's all we saying, reiterating the demand and really the cause of earlier Black students that came along talking about police gun violence. But back when the Panthers came along, the Panthers didn't like gun violence in the community. And they were scholars. Huey Newton had his PhD and he understood the law. So when he started saying that we could go around our communities, open carry to guard our communities and keep our communities safe from this police gun violence that was taking place, that was really impactful. And the government and society hadn't seen anything like that. And California legislation wanted to change that. So they were looking to make stricter gun laws so that the Panthers couldn't march around and open carry. And so when they went to the Capitol that day, they were protesting that law. And so it's kind of a coincidence that people ask, well, why are you choosing May 2nd? They were protesting stricter gun laws. The reason why they were protesting stricter gun laws was that it wouldn't allow them to protect and defend themselves from the police gun violence. So essentially, police gun violence was at the forefront of why they were up there. And so May 2nd is the day that we chose to reiterate the demand, which is actually number 7 of the 10-point platform, is that we want the immediate end to the police brutality and murder of Black people.
Okay. So as you guys got together and you guys gained momentum, a lot of you guys was on the front line, seemingly from the beginning of, the whole Stephon Clark situation that started in 2008. I'm not saying it ends in 2019. It's not the end game, but we still are waiting for the officers that are still walking and working, right? And have not been fired. There's been no final destination to say, we do know they're not getting charged, right? And of course, we know the lawsuit is a lawsuit. What it is, there's a high likely chance that the lawsuit will be paid out, because usually that's what happens, right? As you guys kind of got a little bit more front, close, and center compared to the first part of the Stephon Clark situation in 2018 to 2019, what really truly inspired you guys to get together and say, let's not just focus on, gun reform with just the community, right? Because that's what we usually talk about. Negroes need to give up their gun, right? What a powerful situation that is if you think about it, right? If a Negro was able to carry a gun in his community and it's being over policed, you get to do what? Defend yourself, right? We get to shoot at the cops, right? I mean, and that's going to stop a police officer like, okay, we come over here. Imagine they're not getting out of the area if they kill Stephon Clark, right? Because now we got our guns open and carry, we busting back, right? Someone's coming out that house like bang, bang, because they hear gun shooting, right? I mean, that's just the truth, right? Yeah. So what truly inspired, besides the Black Panther, to kind of roll the dice, because, a lot of folks are probably going to sit there and say, and they have said to me, why are you supporting young people walking out of school? Because our education system is so correct. What makes you guys believe that this is going to help anything, especially when the spark, even though a lot of folks are still doing a lot of groundwork when it comes to the Stephon Clark thing, it's not being seen visually because there's still a lot of groundwork being done. What and why do you feel like it's important to do this now? What are your outcomes are you looking for?
Man, so really we only have 2 goals and objectives for this march. The first one is to add police gun reform to the national discussion on gun reform. And the second one is to educate Black students on the importance of police gun reform and the pillars of our march. So we have 6 different pillars in the march. One of them is police accountability. The second one is independent investigations of police use of force. The third is demilitarizing the police. Another one is criminalize the use of deadly force. The last 2 is mental health services, mental health crisis services, and acknowledgement and apology for historic injustices. So like we're talking about a lot of different things. There's a lot of moving parts to this march, but we know that the fight to get these things done is a long fight. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, as Brother Nipsey would say. And so we're not saying that if these things don't happen by the end of our march or by the end of the week, that this march was a failure. Our only 2 goals is to add this discussion to the national discussion of police gun reform and to educate Black students, which we've already accomplished just with putting this march together.
Fact.
Okay.
You touched on it all. This is really spurred from initially the legislation was 931 last year that came out from McCarty and Lever once after Stephon got killed. Was shelved, and then now we see AB 392. And we've kind of expanded on that. Like we're focusing on a lot more than just the law. As we know, this is a marathon, and this is there's so many moving parts to why to fixing the policing problem, and that policing problem is just one problem in our community. So, like you said, this isn't something that we're hoping to have accomplished by the end of the march. This is an ongoing and kind of an endemic process as we continue to fight for police accountability and for the ending of the over-policing of our neighborhoods. One thing I actually just realized that we haven't talked about was how we got to the situation of over-policing. And I put that in the note that I sent you yesterday. And it's all stems back from the war on drugs and war on crime. Literally, I was looking at the numbers, and in 1980, there was 140 black men, black individuals in prison, while there are about 400,000 in college. And then come 2000, we see 760,000 people in prison, black people in prison, and
Run those numbers again. That's important because I want you to run those numbers again.
In 1980, there were roughly 160,000 black individuals in prison, while there are roughly 400,000 in college. Through the war on crime and war on drugs, Reagan declared the war on drugs in 1982, even though Nixon had already started it. By the time we hit 2000, through the 3 strikes laws and after the war on drugs and that tough on crime rhetoric, we have 700,000 black individuals in prison, while 600,000 are in college. So we just see how those numbers quickly disperse and quickly kind of funnel that prison pipeline for black men through the over-policing of our neighborhoods. And that's how we got to the situation where our communities are being so heavily policed. And that's why we have these disproportionate killings of black men and black women by police officers in our communities, because they're now surveilling our communities as a result of the war on drugs.
And, I kind of want to piggyback on that. The 6th pillar of our march is acknowledgement and apology for historic injustices. And Brother Barry, you had touched on the slave catching part earlier, talking about how we don't even understand the relationship between police and black people, how that relationship is broken, how it's been destroyed, and who functioned to destroy it. So whenever we have these conversations with police, between community and police, it's always talking about how the community, the black community and the police need to equally come together and fix this damaged relationship. But when we ask, well, how did the relationship get damaged? What types of things happen to destroy the relationship between the police and the black community? Why don't black people trust the police? Why don't black people want police in the community? Why do black people say things like, fuck the pigs? Why do we have this terrible relationship? Well, it's in history. It's well documented. All you got to do is read the books. So like Brother Barry was saying, the police started off as slave catchers. Our first introduction to each other wasn't, hi, nice to meet you. My name is such and such. It's, boy, where's your papers at? You coming back to this plantation with black people trying to get free, and the police was the slave catchers to bring us back to the plantation, dead or alive.
And the thing about it, black people were free.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And black people were free, and they still were taking them because of papers. When you look at the redlining and all those different things, if black people didn't have jobs, they're going to bring them to prison.
That's called the vagrancy laws.
All of that. So you feel me? So it's starting off bad. And then how did this relationship evolve? Well, after slavery, we had segregation and Jim Crow, right? We had a whole bunch of black people saying that we should be able to use the same restrooms and same water fountains as everyone else. We love Martin Luther King. What was the police doing? Man. The police was damn near beating Martin Luther King's behind. You know what I mean? Like the police was on the other side of justice when we talk about having equal opportunity and being able to use the same, having integration in the segregation. Police on the other side of that. Then we look at the Black Power movement. Black people coming out strong, talking about, look, the police ain't gonna treat us like this no more. What was the police's response? The police's response was to infiltrate these organizations, kill the leaders, destroy the organizations. Then, like we talked about, the crack epidemic, which Brother John Singleton was highlighting with his film Snowfall, talked about how the government had this plan to get money and fund a war in Nicaragua by putting cocaine in our communities. Where was the police in this? The police was complicit. The police was a part of mass incarceration. The police was part of the crack area that locked so many of us up. So when we look at this relationship and how it's been destroyed, the police have to know this and take accountability for it and begin to repair this relationship from this history of wrongdoing. If there's to be any type of relationship, but we can't just, I know Brother Malcolm came back, has said that you can't stick a knife in my back 6 inches and then remove it 3 and call it progress.
Yes.
So you can't stop doing some of the things that you were doing before and think that this relationship is mended. You have to actually repair some of those things. So, and real quick, last thing I'm gonna say on that is
you doing your thing.
what the police have to do. The police need to be trained on this history, because when you even talk to police officers, they don't even know that their foundation was slave catchers. And police need to be trained on the history of the relationship with them and the Black community. Officers need to know that, so when they go into these communities, they can understand why Black people, when you see police ride by, they'll say F you. Or we just seen like Black kids, they posted a video of the Black kids cussing out the police here in Sacramento, right? I don't know, did we all see that?
Which one?
It was a bunch of little kids, and the police was trying to stop them, and the Black kids was kind of like cussing at them, giving them a hard time, and they were highlighting how the police handled it well, which I think that they did do a pretty good job. But I mean, they're kids. What are you supposed to do? You just did your job.
Even though they handcuffed in Chicago, they handcuffed the kid for not doing what they asked him to do or whatever. So
put him in the back and took him to the precinct.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, shouts out to MJ. She's talking about what we was just talking about, convict leasing, when they're moving around, and they ain't got their papers.
It's called bankruptcy. Started in Virginia, worked its way down throughout the South.
Everything that you guys have said, everything that you've highlighted is true to life. My thing is, how do we get from this March for Your Lives to really resonate on folks to be activated in the activism in a way to say that it ain't just about gun reform with a bunch of community guns being placed. It's about gun reform with a bunch of police having guns that are not ill-equipped to utilize the guns because they're moving and shooting targets that they shouldn't be shooting. What do we get folks to really say that I want to be involved? How do we get these people to kind of resonate into this reality? Because everything that you saying to us, it sounds well.
Yeah.
And it speaks truth to power, because it is power and it's reality.
Right on.
But what about the other folks?
I think it starts with education. If we follow on, we read in the books and the trials and tribulations of our ancestors, one of the most important things that the Panthers did was focus on the youth and the education programs. Fred Hampton I remember watching a video of Fred Hampton go through a proposal. He was like, where are the education programs at? You got to have the education. Without the education programs, we can have anything else. And he goes in the example of Papa Doc in Haiti. Papa Doc in Haiti hated white people. He even said you couldn't put the white people in front of Papa Doc's face. He hated white people. But when he moved all the white people out, he took over and became the oppressor. So like we gotta really focus on these educational programs. And if we're trying to get people to embody and like come into the movement, we gotta first educate them, first educate the youth primarily, because a lot of our older folks and a lot of our old heads are already stuck in their way. So we focus on the youth, and me and Josh talked about this a lot, focusing on the youth and getting to them first, put this in their head, like this is what needs to happen, this is the truth, this is the history. We get to them and they're like, okay, bet, I see what you see, I see what needs to be done, and we get that. Once we get the youth involved, the grown folks is like, well, damn, the youth is pushing it. If we look at history, the youth and the college students and the students, period, have always been ones to lead the revolution and press the issue.
Yeah, and I think real quick, I think that May 2nd is a day of education. So anyone who, and I definitely understand the concerns of like parents as well and teachers and all of that, but I would push on them that day is a day of education. I feel like education on policing in our communities and our relationship with the police is something that's not brought up and being taught in standardized education. And I think that that has to deal with education today being old. It's played out. That's why, I mean, we see our population of students not graduating at a high rate, and we're looking like, well, what's going on with the students? What's going on with the students? No, what's going on with the education? The education is outdated. It hasn't been revolutionized or changed in over 100-some years. We had the same process. So on May 2nd, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be studying a problem that exists within our communities, because that's what I think education. Capitalism makes education about getting jobs, but education is about learning so that you can impact your family first, yourself, your family, then your community. So on May 2nd, we're going to be educating ourselves. We've already been going into schools talking about the problem, but on May 2nd, students are going to use this education to affect policy change, to affect advocacy. They're going to use communication skills, political science skills, sociology skills, and able to impact their environment and their communities. And the goal is to reach this nationwide. So May 2nd is definitely a day of education. Students are going to be called out to come down downtown and to advocate for police gun change in our communities. That's the biggest education that you can have on a Thursday here in Sacramento.
Now, is this only Black students?
So the reach is for Black students, but we're asking all students to come out as well. But we definitely want Black students there. That's why we called it a Black student walkout, because the Black Panther Party, which was a group of Black students, came and marched on the Capitol back on May 2nd, right? So we're definitely trying to make sure we impact the Black students, but we're asking all students to come out.
Okay.
Well, Sister Crystal said it's important because we are all impacted by gun violence in one way or another. And it's important that we as people gain knowledge on guns for our own safety and security.
Facts.
These were some of the comments
Facts.
came in earlier. The best way to beat our enemy is to come to war in strong numbers and with our own tactics.
Facts.
And then someone else basically said that you guys were two brilliant young men, and you know they got their vote. They read the move. What I was going to ask you all is that, given the fact that you guys are a student, you have education, you know history, what if the police is like, we don't give a fuck what y'all say? We think y'all the enemy, and we gonna keep shooting y'all down because we have to annihilate you. Then what do you do?
That's facts. And that's.
I'm just asking that because y'all are young.
Yeah.
And y'all, you know what I mean? I feel like this is all cute. Not cute. I don't even say it like that. This is all great and well. But I also know when you're given the historical factors of what has happened, why do we keep trying to ask the system to change to fit us when that's not how the system came to be? And I know that's kind of like a hard concept. I'm not saying give your information or whatever, but what do you do when you realize you have an open enemy who has his open season on you for close to 400 years? And we're asking them to change the way that they train, to change the way that to get them to see you as a human being when you know that they're not going to do that because they don't think you're a human being. You're 2/4 of a human being. I mean, they value their dog more than they value you. You shoot a police dog, all hell will break loose. They'll open up a whole can of a bunch of bullets on you. Then what's the plan? What can we do?
Oh man, Malcolm said the price of freedom is death. If it's open season.
But how many are ready to die?
If this keeps happening, do you not feel like we're gonna get there?
No, I'm just saying. But get there
Right now.
No,
right
get
now,
there.
no.
Get there is one thing. Willing is another thing.
Right now, if it was willing to take up arms and go out there and defend our communities, we'd be doing it. However, there are I feel like there's multiple problems in our community before we can even get to that. We got plenty of guns in the hood. They're not being directed outwards; they're being directed inwards. So it's problems like that before we can even get to that, to educate ourselves in our communities to even get on that level.
So I'm gonna give you a good example. On your university campuses and in your colleges and your high school, there are Black people who feel so disconnected from other Black folks.
Facts.
And I'm not saying that they're whitewashed and I don't believe in throwing those titles up on people because they don't want to do what the fuck you doing. You know what I'm saying? However, I don't see us always figuring out how do we even begin the conversation with those young people? Because that's how they're able to maintain. There's always some of us that rather be sitting at the table with the enemy because they don't feel warm from the table to people who look like them. How do we then start to engage them? Because they got education. Supposedly, that's why they go to college. But what is the disconnect that is hard to get us to see that we really are linked in this struggle somehow, even if you don't live in the projects?
I think that the safest place in America for Black people is to I call it cooning. I know we don't like putting names on people.
No,
and
I
stuff.
get that.
I love it.
Right.
I
I think
get
that's just the
I get
safest
that.
place, and I think that capitalism fuels this system to where those type of safe places people are going to want to assume, and they can even know what's going on and know the truth and everything. But to stay safe, they'll put themselves in these positions and not confront or not address these things, and maybe even be complicit with the oppression of other Black people. And I think that, me personally, I think that we have to apply pressure to those safe places and make those places not as safe. You know what I mean? Because when it's not safe to be in those places, then you'll have less people assuming to those positions. So that's just my personal
No,
opinion.
we need to hear that, y'all, young minds. What would you do? Because I feel like that's the part that's missing. It's one of the parts.
Man, I'll build without the Negroes. Because it's the thing is to them, to you can, because some of them, and it's messed up because we know we have folks who have that, who know our history, who know this history, and still decide to side with the master.
Whoa.
So it's like,
Say that again.
You know our history, you still decide to side with master. So it's like their views of
That's
him.
deep.
If you like, I've been trying to peep like just this perspective they give, or like people who who want to assimilate, and this is just their idea of progression. And they'll preach to you, oh no, we're all human. You just stop playing this race game. We didn't create the race game. We don't want to gotta deal with it. Now we gotta fix it because it's affecting us. But you want the places where all human card and assimilate with massa. Seems like you trusting them a little bit too much. Like Josh said, we gotta either make the spaces not comfortable for them or make them not safe for them. But they feel so secure around them because they're helping get them this capitalist way of living, or it's like this way of like living that benefits them. Makes it seem like we have a good life, ignoring poverty. Yeah, ignoring the poverty. And like we become underrepresented and we don't become spoken for because you become middle class, upper middle class, whatever.
Well, what does that mean? Because you can still get shot down in your middle class neighborhood.
Exactly. They still get that nigga number pulled up. Daryl likes to say you still get that nigga number card.
Well, Maya Jackson said we don't have the resources or the fortitude to fight back. And
I don't believe that.
no, I believe it in two sections of why. One, I don't believe we don't have the resources, and we do have the resources.
Yes, we do.
But do we have the fortitude? We don't have the fortitude.
Okay, I get
And
that.
I believe that. So
I get
in
that.
angles
I get
of
that,
she's
sis.
right about that, but she's wrong about this.
I get that.
And when I listen to my bros, my king brothers, you know what I'm saying, my nephews, my rocks, my solid ones, I'm so proud because I remember, with me and J Rob, when I started doing this whole outside of the Sankofa that when we met, I started doing this whole, fight against the master's plan as far as against policing, right? And people thought I was crazy in our circumference because it was like, we got to build for self. And I understood that. But I also said, but there's a whole bunch of folks that are already stranded that we got to go get that won't understand building for self is going to be truly revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to identify the problem that's plaguing us, not only the problems in our community. So I remember when Jay was younger, and I used to just bring him around all these little different little pods of, police commissions, council, getting him out here to these protests. And I was watching him just, resonate with everything that was going on, putting him on certain interviews. And I told him, I kept on telling him, I said, bro, you're going to be able to be a force because the way your mind thinks and you're in this college, you're going to be able to do something that is going to be very powerful for the movement. It's almost like you're just sprinkling, right? You're sprinkling the ingredients for the recipe. And so when nephew came and saw me doing a lot of the political things on the back end, watching me from the social media, then kind of jumping in and saying, well, now it's my time. I'm proud of these brothers as well as the sisters that are not here to be representing, that they saw what folks like myself and others were doing. And we weren't doing it for the fanfare. We were doing it because there was really, truly, especially here in Sacramento, there was truly a problem. And I don't think there was a problem that Sacramentians wanted to identify because we're comfortable without identifying the problem, because we want to believe the words of diversity. We want to believe the words of multiculturalism. We want to believe that we have progressed and we've moved further, even though we see dead Black bodies, even though we walk in communities that ain't Black. And I'm going to say this right now. There is no such thing as a Black community in Sacramento.
I agree with that. We're too
For
spread
us to
out.
keep on talking about the Black community, show me where there's a Black community in Sacramento where I have a majority of those people that have businesses are Black. That's a community to me, where you have resources that are based on folks that have been there several times. We have a lot of displaced Black communities, but we don't have a full on of a Black community. So I say, with much respect to what's going on and to the folks that are shaking in their boots about what's happening, if we don't take a stance, if you're worried about your child being arrested, if you're worried about being arrested, if you're worried about being killed, if you're worried about whatever, you are not prepared for this revolutionary kind of build, this revolution kind of approach that is going on right now. Because if you're having all these thoughts, that you're not ready to go the extra mile and sacrifice as our ancestors sacrificed. That's why some of the things I've been telling y'all in the background, I've been intimate about, because I look at it like this. Sacramento don't want another stain, right? And if there's 200 kids out there doing what they feel is right in their constitutional right, doing as they need to bring light on something that folks have readily just said, okay, when a white person does it, it's let's go ahead and let's lift them up and let's put them on Time magazine because they're fighting against gun violence. When Black people do it, it's like a revolutionary act. Oh my God, are they going to take over the Capitol? We cannot fear the end result, because I know Sacramento does not want to be put on a national page again with arresting 200 kids because they don't have a permit to be wherever they're supposed to be, that they walked out of school. The time for fear is over. The time to build is now. And if we're not going to build when all of the chips are against us now, when are we going to? Is it going to take these two brothers to be killed? Is it going to take my sister to be killed for us to finally say, oop, I got it? A revolutionary build is not only to make those uncomfortable and our people uncomfortable with our oppression, but it's also to build. And what we're building is something revolutionary, because had I known that what I was doing with some of my other comrades as we were doing it in 2013, 2014, and moving forward, that it would spark up more young people to say, I got to jump in the game, that I would have been like, oh man, this is the best kind of result for me, because it's woken up spirits and woken up lions, and we're now moving forward. Because I think that when Black people navigate and say gun reform, but hey, police gun reform, that's a more powerful message than just saying gun reform, because it's just not about the sanctuaries, the schools being shot up. It's about Black people being shot up by police. And we have to look at that and identify that as being a systematic problem.
So a couple of comments. Sister Donetta said they must be willing to be martyrs and to die for what they believe in. And then Sister Crystal said they won't change. We have to change our minds and how we move. And I think that's because the other stuff is great. This is what I do know. Every place in America has already done this already. I don't think nothing I do is a new thought. That's how you take the ego out of it, because how they were able to conquer us is that they look for the dude with the ego or the sister with the ego. And then they send people in to blow your ego up. And then, you look up and then you be standing there by yourself because they killed all your people. Did Sacramento have a Black thriving community? Yes, they did. They had the colleges. They had all of that. And then they got old. Maybe they didn't train people. Maybe people moved away. We do a good job. And when people come Black, we do a good job as Black people saying, don't just say Black, say of color. What about the other groups? We do that. We do that. And so, where you have no roots, you can't stand. You can't stand on this branch. Now, that branch will break off and you be done. So I feel like Jody is saying, is a lack of a Black community in Sacramento a choice?
What you think first?
Let me ponder on that for a little bit.
Is it a choice?
Is it a choice of lack of a Black community?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's socially engineered, but I think at this point, at the same time, it's a little bit of both. So the destruction of the Black community was not a choice, but the lack of rebuilding it is yeah. Right. So the Black community was destroyed from white folks. The white government structures of America destroyed Black communities all across America. And they've socially engineered things to where this education is not being taught in school. So like this should be, and this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that education has to be revolutionized. Because when you're going to school and learning as a Black student, there's things that you need to learn about your family, your community, and why things are so excuse my language, fucked up. When you go to the corner store and you see older brothers asking you for $1 or the sisters running around wild and stuff, you just think like, damn, you know, you're not processing what's going on, but you know something's not right. When you go to school to get educated, that's supposed to be part of the education.
Well, when you go to school educated, you come out dumber than you came in. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Or you just come out looking to get a job in white America. That's what education has become. And so since you're not being educated on the problem and what happened to your community, then you don't know that you're supposed to rebuild it and to build it back up. So I think it's a little bit of both. I would say 90% socially engineered, but there's a 10% now that it's a choice for us to build it back up, especially those who know. Because I think a lot of people don't know.
Do we have any responsibility at all, though? Because here's what I know: if this person is my open enemy, I don't think it's their job to rebuild me. You know, I'm a Game of Thrones, y'all. I'm not going to. I watched the Game of Thrones. God damn it! Let me tell you why. I think part of it is the history. I think they exaggerate. But one of the things I do get, I like. I am. That third episode was crazy as hell. Like, but it was heated.
I bet you wasn't better than the Avengers.
No, let me tell you something. I didn't see it. But what I'm saying is, there is something about you willing to die for generations you're never gonna see.
Yeah.
And some of us are so in love with the right now, and we're so into religion because it's going to help us somehow do the work that we don't want to do ourselves, that we're just not willing to go all in because we want to be able to have a nice car and be vegan and because sometimes we act like vegan is something we do to be cute. Like, I don't drink milk, I don't eat expected milk, I don't eat butter. It's like, dude, okay, but people are starving all over the world. Look at Venezuela. Like, they're fighting, even though some of that is backed by our government. We ain't even talked about that.
A lot of that.
Yeah, I'll take that too. But it reminds me of the spook who stepped out of the door when he said, how can America police the world and keep us on our ass too? And I feel like how they keep us on our ass too is that we keep ourselves on our ass. And when it comes to accountability, that's what we put it on the white man, which he's like, well, great. When I hear people say shit like that, I'm not gonna front, it makes me almost feel like this is a person that's not gonna fucking work.
Right.
Because I know this is who he's always been. I don't expect nothing from him. I don't expect this man to free me. He can't stand me. Why would he free me?
We're affected by what goes on daily about what America does. Like with Venezuela, we're like kind of standing with America when we should be standing away from America.
That's
like
my point.
What we see in Venezuela is exactly what's happened to us.
Right.
I think that we get caught up into that American ideology compared to that African ancestor ideology of build. We're here because we've been here. We're here not on stolen land. We're here on land that we have kind of created and built.
Well, I stole an ass.
Yeah, it was exactly. So here we now need to navigate in the idea and structure of how do we build something greater than ourselves and not worry about more or less of the American kind of dream. What is the black dream? What is the African dream? And I think that if we fall into that and deliver that message, I think that we'll do a lot better. I think we just get caught up in this wave so often about America, and it's because America has provided for those Negroes, the silly ass Negroes who are playing basketball, that are that rap artists. I mean, and that's kind of like you destroy the communities and then you award the Negroes that have helped destroy the community or walk out of the community and give them the riches, give them the fame, and folks like us are just kind of like the rhetorics, and we're like the Malcolm X's, the Angela Davises of the world that are just talking this truth to power and this identification of black for self that is just kind of not really real, because there ain't no black person that can pay you like a white person, that can reward you like a white person. And
I salute you, brothers, because I feel like sometimes what I know Malcolm X, the people who I interviewed who was around during his time, who was around doing I talked to Garveyites when I was younger. They said not only did they enlighten them, they made them want to get up and do something. They knew they had a responsibility. They may not have went to the street, but just the way that they were able to communicate with each other, feed each other, take care of each other, make sure their kids got home from school or wherever. There is some, I feel like we have all of these other deterrents, like hashtag, and we hear that and we don't do shit. We be like, oh yeah, hashtag the marathon, hashtag,
Yeah, because I'm still waiting for the conspiracy. If the government killed Nipsey, not one nigga done came to the government, not one police dead, not one government informant agent dead, It's just like, why are we talking about something that we ain't gonna do shit about?
Yeah.
And my thing is, what we can do is we can build. I just know that. That's where my thing is. We can preference the identity of what white supremacy has done, but then after we've identified it and we said, here's our education, we must now build outside of the miseducated. And if we don't do that, then we become boo-boo the fools.
And how we do that in community is what I'm saying. So let me tell you why I said it like that. Like, you know, what happens with that. It really makes me think of when you see all these random shootings, you don't think that shooting talks to their base?
Oh no, facts.
Why don't it work the same for us?
No.
I think touching on some of the things that you was talking about, Sister Rolanda, especially like on accountability, I think that there's a big accountability part that Black people we need to be concerned on and start taking up and addressing. I think about like on the revolutionary side, like we need to be ready to die for some shit. I think that all Black people should have that mindset, but I caution Black people ready to kind of like take that charge right now in the state that we're in right now. Just because in the 80s we did that, right? In the 70s and 80s, with the Black Panther Party was probably like the forefront of that, and the Black Revolutionary Army and all of these organizations that were on that front. And what's the reality of that is that you may actually die. You know what I mean? and when you actually die, I mean, right now I don't think there's enough people doing the work. No. So who's going to continue to work? And what happened last time was a whole bunch of people was revolutionary and did some real shit and died and went to jail. And all we had was a bunch of kids running around to take up the mantle. So what they do is put cocaine in the hood, and then you got a whole bunch of kids running around
without
raising
parents
kids,
that have to survive.
And the culture gets fucked up now. So now the culture's fucked up. So we in a state right now where our culture, we gotta make some changes within our culture.
So I thought, keep going.
Okay,
keep going. Y'all keep talking. Y'all keep talking. Go ahead.
I think we got to make some changes within our culture. We got to build some types of things, because if people, when we do get to a point where people may want to do something like that, it has to be, you have to have a community first. You have to have something to fall back on. You got to have people ready to take up the mantle and hold things down and be able to continue to build to the next generation. And right now, accountability is a big part. I mean, I think that if people are ready to go to war, if they are, I'm not saying that they is, you know, but if people are ready to go to war with the police or the United States government, anything like that, then my first question would be, can you stop the war in your neighborhood and community? Or can you be on top of that? Can you be the force in your own community? And if you can't prove to me that, and you can't stop the gun violence in your own community or give orders and shit like that, I don't got no faith in your revolutionary talk about going against the police or anything like that. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm like, bro, I'm more on the building side right now, rather than we can either build or destroy. Right now, I think that there's a lot of work to do in terms of building. And honestly, when you look at how things work, it's a lot easier to destroy than it is to build.
Yeah.
Building, you can build a house. If building a house, man, it may take you damn near a year or something to build a house, right? But to destroy, you destroy it in a week.
Oh, man.
It's always harder to build something. An organization, any type of organization we got, people probably spend years building an organization. But that organization can be destroyed within months.
And that's kind of the preference of, like, you know, a lot of the things that we see. Like, as I started Voice of the Youth in 2008, and it took me like damn near 7 years to really be recognized for the work that I've been doing and all the stuff that had been going on with my organization. So the reality becomes this: how are we easier to destroy things, and then unfortunately we don't necessarily want to build things? Why do you feel like we're okay with the destruction, but we are frustrated and we're in fear of the build?
Because it's hard to organize. And Black people have a sensation of instant gratification. So you get that instant gratification destroying something, then what? That's just what I've seen. Even in Sacramento, we're, like you said, we're wanting to destroy because you get that instant gratification. And we all know it is harder to organize, but it is a battle that must be done. And it's harder to build. And some Negroes just don't, just want to defect on that and continue on their own personal lives. That's just a short answer to why that's harder.
So the information on tomorrow, what's give us a framework of it all? When does it start? Where's it going to be at? Are you guys sharing that information right now? You want to keep okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, that information out. So tomorrow at 11 a.m. meeting up at the Crocker Art Museum and everything will take place from there. So schools will all be making their way down there. We're asking people to help out with getting students to the destination downtown, and then, helping out downtown as well. We have some people, but we definitely asking for more community support that we can have, the better, especially when dealing with high school age kids. You know what I mean? Just making sure that everything's going to be cool and that they're supported, and that type of support is needed at this point. So if you do want to offer a volunteer with that, tap in with any one of these people on the panel. Also, you could email or DM the March for Our Lives 2. Go follow that on Instagram. That's the page for it, March for Our Lives 2. MARCH 4 FOR Our Lives 2 TOO. Follow that page and send DMs if you want to get involved or you want to help out.
Now, we're going to be on the front line as not only community leads, but as far as following the lead of our soldiers, because that's what you're supposed to do, right?
That's right.
That's how you line it up. As brothers have followed me, sisters have followed me, I have to follow them, and that's our duty. And I think that it was funny that an old head, and I explained to the old head, and I won't speak the person's name, because when they came out, and then this is what I said, this is why this is a disconnect. And the old head was like, I'm frustrated with, it was me and Pastor Les Simmons. Shout out to my brother, Pastor Les. It's like, I'm frustrated that y'all sat there and allowed those young people to walk out of school, but you haven't got them to vote. And we both looked at her like, I said one, yeah, and I said her. So it kind of, some of the cats out the bag. And it was just kind of like, well, like, first of all, the way you even stated that statement was just blanket, because we've both been behind a series of initiatives led to have engagement with Black young youth voting, as well as olders, educating them, whether it's a negative or a positive. We're saying education of voting to use it as leverage. That's one. And secondly, if my brothers and sisters came and said, yo, we got to, we're going to march this day, we're going to do a walkout, and me calling myself a revolutionary builder, me calling myself, or them calling me the community leader, or looking at me from the years of work that I've done, right, and called on them to assist me on things, right, say, well, I don't believe that you guys should march in school, this, that, and giving them every kind of excuse for me not to be involved, right, I would have been a hypocrite. And the respect level that they would have had for me would have diminished right there, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I would be more in a silly Negro box. I would be in a cool box. I would be on a Negro that's comfortable with what's going on, right? As long as we have, I think, let me be very clear. I think some people are okay with police violence against the Black community. I think some people strive off of police violence in the Black community, because that's the only time they really show up for the community, right? Whether it's police violence in a Black community or the police are killing us, I mean, that's time for work. But there's all kind of work in our community besides just police. And that's just being honest, because we have to talk about that. I don't need folks to show up when it's time for the white man that is attacking us. I need y'all to show up when it's time to build without the white man being informed about anything, right? So when I sat there and I spoke to that elder, I said, this is the reason why it's disconnected. This is the reason why young folks don't rock with you, and folks like myself who still in that middle age don't rock with y'all, because what y'all have done, because of the fact of vote, it ain't got us nowhere. We ain't moved nowhere fast. If that has gotten us anywhere, why the hell are we marching right now? Why are we walking out of high schools right now? You know what I'm saying? So the idea to believe that voting is just the only way to attract change, the idea to believe that doing something radical that meets folks that are more engaged with more revolutionary ways of approaching things compared to like that bleak, let me ask my principal, we can all walk out for a second, then walk back into the school and like show this sign of solidarity, that don't do shit for nobody. Guess what? We walking out your school because we walking out your school, we know that's going to cause some kind of disruption. And that disruption is going to cause you to look at, well, what do we need to change? When all folks are all in the change begins. If all folks are sitting off thinking that everything is good because nobody's complaining, no one's going to sit there and change anything. Like if I want a restaurant experience to be my best experience and the food comes out whack, do I sit there and just kind of eat the food and be okay with it. No, I say, hey, waiter, fix this shit up. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not going to pay for something I don't like. So we cannot continue to pay for the attitude and the corruption and the death that we don't like. We must charge and do something. So it's relevant that old folks get on board, young folks get on board, the bourgeois get on board, the fraternities get on board, the police that say they're good police get on board, because that's what we often hear. If you're good police, will stand on the side of right. It's time for the community really to grow, throw the egos and who's doing what and why they're doing it, and it's all about me and how we move. There's all type of different ways to slay the enemy. Why I say that? Because the enemy has done all kind of things to keep us put down and oppressed. They gave us enslavement. They gave us crack. They killed our leaders. And they didn't just do one thing. You know what I'm talking about? The enemy was sharp. They gave us HIV, right? You know, they've done so many different things to us to keep us leveled down. They separated the black family. They gave
us reality TV shows.
They gave us reality TV. They stole hip hop and gave us their version of hip hop that they feel we want to hear. So there's been all these different ways that the enemy has attacked us, that has lined us up for defeat. How the hell do we dare think that there's only one way to attack this enemy when he has showed us that we will destroy you in multiple ways? So there's so much pride that I have that May 2nd is happening. I'm saluting all my soldiers that are standing in the midst of the gap. I tell my soldiers, don't fear the inevitable, because you stand on your ancestors and you stand on levels of greatness. What will be, and we salute y'all, and we're with y'all, and we're going to march with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
What can some of the elders and the OAs and the old people do to help y'all with this march? We know some of us who won't post, we already know what we're supposed to do. But say if you're old and you just like, I should be out there doing something, what would you want them to do? I think I still get their ass instruction, but that's just me.
I think that showing up is just a big part of it. You know, show up to the march, see what's actually going on. Don't read about it in the paper the next morning. Show up and see what these black youth are doing tomorrow, especially if you're mad or you're frustrated, you don't think that it should be going on. You should be the first one down there seeing what's exactly happening, what these students are doing, what they talking about. You should be the first one down there. I think that's a big thing that you could do, show up and show out. I think another one is use and leverage your connections and your network to make sure that the police ain't tripping out tomorrow. You know what I mean? Make sure that the police ain't getting at black students and understand that it's a bunch of black students. Don't start wilding out. You know what I mean? Have patience. If something pops off, which it won't, de-escalate that situation. Don't treat it crazy. And just reach out and ask how you can support. That's big too, basically.
Right on. Will y'all come back and give us an update?
Yeah, for sure.
No doubt.
Tell us about David Banner. I just got him.
Oh man, David Banner, A Message to the Black Community. David Banner was coming out June 9th. You guys can get your
With the butterfly dope.
Hey. Health Professions. We shouts out to Health Professions, Black Student Union for sponsoring, opening up their space. David Banner is the hip hop activist is coming down June 9th. You can get your tickets at Hidden Gems Thrift Store, 2245 Suite 12. You can get that. We're open every day except Monday, 11 to 6 from Tuesday to Thursday, and 11 to 7 from Friday to Saturday, Sunday 12 to 5 p.m., as well as Eventbrite, Message to the Black Community featuring David Banner. Eventbrite, A Message to the Black Community featuring David Banner. Please make sure that you post that, please, that information there for the people. Please get your tickets. We are talking black, y'all. We're talking about cannabis investment. We're talking about education. We're talking about voting. We're talking about building. We're talking about building. We're talking about building. We're talking about investing. Because my reality, their reality, all our reality is Black power matters first. Because if we do not take back the power that has been stripped from us, and I believe some of us have allowed to go, some of the greatest inventions in America have been what? Black people inventing it, right? So we're going to talk about all those different things. Young youth are going to be in for free, 11 to 17. We're going to have some guest speakers. My brothers will be there, not only doing some vending, but as well as speaking to the people. And I'm going to have some entertainment. This is going to be a fun, powerful day. My Queen Mama Rose is going to do a little healing component as we start off our day. We're just gonna kind of bless our city with a message, and a message that is correct and true to ourselves and is directly to us. This ain't about nobody else. This is about us. Connecting with the Black experience has always been a fun thing to kind of be able to bring out some real conversation. So folks, continue to hit us on social media platforms, Mama Roll, myself, Barry Axius, and continue to dial in, and let's really start engaging in messages that separate us from others, because everyone is building for self. When white folks got that cannabis legalized, they have been building like a motherfucker. So we got to be able to sit there and figure out how we can get into that game as well, because all money, you know what I'm saying, that can make a major profit, that can build our community, makes sense to me. And that's what we have to do. We have to allow folks to be a part of the remodeling of our community, not be a part of the gentrification of our community. So again, David Vanner, June 9th.
All right. Anything else? Any closing word from y'all?
Oh, I want to start off on a quote.
All right.
Pertaining to Josh's perspective on education, this was quote by Dr. Amos Wilson. He's a Pan-African theorist and psychologist. In his book Blueprint for Black Power, he says, as long as we are not educated to defend ourselves against these people, then we are being incorrectly educated. Nothing else matters. Ultimately, then, intelligence must be defined in terms of the degree in which it solves our problems. The nature of education today prepares you to solve their problems and not your own. That's why you study their books, you go to their schools, you learn their information, their language, their styles, their perceptions. So when you come out of school, you can do a humdinger job of solving European problems and not your own.
Wow.
Dr. Amos Wilson.
That's real. And like I said, family, next Wednesday, we're going to tell you the aftermath of the March for Our Lives 2, as well as jump into a more subject matter that pertaining to you, that pertains to us, that pertains to we. Bless, family.
Jeez.
You heard.
All right.
Good shit, good shit.
Talking about up color. This shit here. Excuse me. Let me turn it off. That was Periscope and Snapchat. Not Snapchat, Periscope, and what's the other one?
Yeah. What is it at 12? There's two.